Hi everyone, I'm Celia Romaniuk from Fjord. I lead the design team.
And I'm Seema, Jain, interaction designer from Fjord.
So I don't know if people here know Fjord. We're a service design company. We're across the globe. We have 19 studios now, about 750 designers. So we love sharing our global learning and our global insights. We love being able to talk to each other about what's going on in Sydney versus Paris versus New York. It's a real picture of what we do. We were founded in 2001, so we've been around for quite a while. We started here in London, and we were acquired by Accenture about 3 years ago. So I just thought, because we haven't spoken at UXPA, certainly not for a while, I thought it was interesting to talk a bit about what we do. I won't spend too long on it. But we do everything from research, so insights for innovation, through to service strategy and blueprints, so helping organisations understand how to solve problems through a customer lens, through to concept and experience design, and finally to prototyping products from both web and app-based products through to physical products. We do a lot of design-led transformation work as well, and Seema's going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. So we do a lot in employee and team experiences, because organisations recognise that if they want to change the way that they work, then how their teams work together and how their colleagues interact with each other needs to change as well. So they look for us to guide us on that. We do large-scale design delivery, so helping large banks and large retailers actually roll out experiences to customers in a customer-centred way. We do what we call design inside, which is helping organisations build design capability. And lastly, innovation spaces. So organisations recognising that if they want to work differently, they may not be able to do that in a typical office space, and they might need different kinds of facilities to do that.
Okay. So on to the topic of today, trends. So every year, our 750 designers actually get together to forecast what we think are going to be our 10 most impactful trends for this year. And what we'd like to do today is to focus in on two of those, design from within and services and planners. So design from within. One of the things we're seeing more and more prevalent at the moment is design capabilities being brought in-house, either via agencies working with large corporations and organisations, or actually setting up and fostering that talent into that organisation. And we can see that we have different types of clients that we work with as well. So those that do actually have digital and design in their DNA, they understand how we think, why we work the way we do, why we feel the way we feel, we're passionate about how we do our work. But then we also have clients coming up and saying, well, we're not actually a technology company, which today doesn't really make any sense. I just thought I'd use this slide just to highlight as ourselves being acquired by Accenture. Nice slide that John May put together at the presentation this year, just showcasing massive flux in acquisitions by other organisations, and you can see that us and Accenture feature there quite a lot, as do IBM, as do Deloitte, as I'm sure most people in this room are probably aware of these acquisitions happening. And what it leads us to be able to understand is that 50% of our work is actually design-led transformation. So rather than thinking about bespoke one-off processes or projects, we actually try and make an impact and transformation within our clients. But what this also means is we're now hearing really good questions from our clients that what do our customers want? How do we actually meet their needs, and how do we create services and products that they actually love? So from seeing this, we're also seeing there's a mindset change, maybe from more traditional operational thinking within organizations to being more innovative, educating clients about changing from more maybe facilities management to innovation spaces and creative ways to build those spaces. Us perhaps somewhat fighting about less communication and more making, creating, designing, doing things. And what we tell ourselves every day, patience, patience, and more patience. I think we all know the challenges that can come with these situations and sharing our knowledge. I'd like to go in a bit more about what we think this means and what we've learned and what we'd like to suggest. So first one, shout about it. Us as designers and what we do every day is important to talk to people about what we're doing, but we can't do this without our champions and our advocates within our organisations that we work with, be it product owners, senior stakeholders, even peers. And we really feel as well that communication takes time. and time takes us away from actually delivering and doing work, but the value is so big that we always want to make time to do it. Space. Space is a big one. No one wants to feel like they're boxed in a corner. We want to feel that we can create a space that design can flourish, and also help clients understand what that space could look like. Even more so important is actually allowing us to showcase our work, so sharing how we work, what we do, and why we do it, and having it accessible to everybody rather than on another PowerPoint deck like this one. This is actually something I have up in the office that I'm working in at the moment. It's a happy coincidence that the acronym spells FNL. But it's just trying to showcase our values and what we're working to one of our clients. And I always say as well, I always think that this is a two-way street. So we have a lot to share, a lot of different knowledge areas the client doesn't have. That we can actually do the work that we do without learning from them as well. Otherwise we're just kind of machining things out, as opposed to creating bespoke and detailed understanding design. I think one of the things, I mean personally I've felt this quite a lot as well, is inertia. So we, as a design agency and how we work, we like to make things quick and fast and fail fast as well. But that's not something that all our clients are used to experiencing. So jumping through hoops is something that we feel all the time, that we're learning, but also helping them speed up and create things and make something that we're also seeing that our clients are experiencing. And again, I'm just going to bring it back to patience.
Thanks, Seema. I'm going to talk about one of our other trends, which we call services with manners, but as you'll see, I'll kind of question that a little bit as we go along. So we're sharing more data than ever before. It takes all sorts of forms. So this is a project people might know that came out a few days ago. They put out pigeons with sensors into London to sense air quality, so that's quite nice. It's quite fun. Actually, my boss saw this and she was like, go back. She saw that pigeon and she went, is that a bit cruel? And I was like, I don't think they're actually putting that sensor on the pigeons' backpacks. They are pigeon backpacks. And there are things like this is a service called Armada, which helps type 2 diabetes patients. It's actually been shown to improve their outcomes in clinical trials. It's a combination of tutorials, tracking, monitoring, looking at positive behaviour change, obviously the thing. And then, I don't know, probably a lot of you here went to the Big Bang Data exhibition at Somerset House in the last few months. This is one of the exhibits there called I Know Where Your Cat Lives. What it does is it takes the metadata from photos posted on social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and actually then can show you where that cat lives. So it's kind of saying, yeah, we know where you live, through the medium of the cat. So it's quite cute. I like this page from their website. They've got the press comments, so they've got, this is like the funniest thing or the creepiest. It's amazing and creepy. But my favourite thing, which people at the back probably can't see, is Lieutenant Andy Norris from the Tuscaloosa County Sheriff's Office, who says, this shows why you should never have your location-based services enabled on social media sites. You're just inviting criminals to your home. And then, even a bit scarier, so this is a system called Sesame in China, which actually assigns citizens a trustworthiness rating. So the slightly odd thing about, well, there are lots of other things about that, but one of the kind of creepy things is that they're using gamification to encourage people to sign up, but what they found is that people didn't even really realise they were signing up, and they also didn't really realise the negative impact that something like this would have on them. So if you're going for a bank loan, for example, and you've got a negative rating, that's and there's a woman called Shoshana Zuboff, who's a professor at Harvard Business School, who she's got a book coming out, which I'll talk about in a second, at the beginning of next year, but there's an article by her online at the moment, which it was brilliant, and they had this extract talking, this is someone from an education company in Silicon Valley talking about how they track data and about how they capture people's behaviours, identify good and bad, and then develop ways to reward good and punish bad. So the obvious question there is, well, who's deciding what's good and bad? This doesn't seem like a very desirable place to be. So Edward Snowden showed us that we're sharing data and we can't necessarily trust the people that we're sharing that data with. So this is this book that I referred to before. Shoshana Zuboff's theory is that, and she argues very convincingly, that there's a new kind of economic system being developed, and it's really, the purpose of it is to directly influence and modify your behaviour, so people can profit from that. So that might be selling you more stuff, it might be selling you different kinds of services. You can think about, well, maybe they could use it to change your opinion about something, maybe they could get your vote a different way. So if you kind of follow that train of thought, you'll see why I've been a bit scared the last few days preparing this talk. So we know that from surveys that people are cautious about sharing their information. So there's an Internet of Things survey I was looking at that said it's about 54%. But if you look at some, this is Edward Snowden's ways to combat, to protect your online privacy, and the kinds of things that he suggests, like don't use Google and Dropbox, use Tor as your web browser, use two-way authentication, encrypt your hard drive. Like, no one does that. Like, I mean, I know people do, but few people do. I certainly don't do this. So it raises the question about why doesn't anyone do anything about this? And I was saying to a friend of mine, is there a word for that thing where a problem is so big that you don't even know how to start grappling with it and you just ignore it? So climate change, aging population, antibiotics resistance, data privacy, and then we kind of found there's actually this term crisis of agency, which people like Natalie Jeremijenko and Seema Berman use. So it's this idea that actually I feel like I can't do anything more, it's too overwhelming and I just have to ignore it, which is obviously not what it has to be. So I think when people talk about trust, when users talk about trust, when we talk about trust, we usually mean it in the context of data. Is my data safe? Like, am I going to get hacked? Is it safe? But the thing is, I think people need to start thinking more of, is my behaviour being predicted and is my behaviour being controlled? Because that's actually what's happening now. And it speaks to really deep concepts about self-determination and democracy, about who we are as human beings in the world and the amount of control we want to have over our own behaviour. So I feel like there are three sort of broad options. The first one is we can just ignore this stuff, just think about something else, think about what we're having for dinner instead. The second one is a kind of as we suggest in our official trends, a kind of services with manners. But I felt like actually, that's a bit Downton Abbey. That's a bit like, we've got this weird situation going on and we're just going to be polite about it and say please and thank you. And that doesn't really feel like it goes far enough. So I'm suggesting more services with ethics. So really actually engage with these questions. So ask ourselves as designers, what are the implications of these systems that we're designing? What are the implications for our users? And as we pride ourselves on being user advocates and customer advocates, so we really need to challenge ourselves to ask these questions and to discuss and drive them with our client teams and our stakeholder teams. Don't think it's someone else's problem, like it's the client problem or the data scientist's problem. It's our problem as designers. And we need to make these issues real in the interface as well, and design for legibility and control. This is such a classic usability principle, but just as relevant today as it ever was, if not more relevant. There's a really big issue around consent as really central. I was talking to someone yesterday who's one of the heads of security at Accenture, and we were talking about an innovation space we're building and about the data issues in that, and he was saying it's actually the issues around the data that you're collecting and who you're collecting it from are important, but the most important thing is that you get people's consent to use that data and how you're using it. If you think about that, like no one reads the terms and conditions on anything. Like, I just went onto Google and, did the screenshot, and I thought, to be fair, they're trying really hard. It's not written badly, but, it's written by lawyers. We know people never read this stuff, so it's important for us as designers to engage and think about how we can encourage users to be aware of the choices that they're making in a UI. I've done a lot of work in financial services in the last couple of years, and we've thought a lot about how do we help customers make responsible decisions. So, for example, how do we help them understand the implication of a 25-year mortgage term versus a 30-year mortgage term? And how do we really display those terms and conditions in a way that customers are actually going to read them? So they're really, great, interesting issues for us to engage with. We've been doing some work with Baroness Bevan-Kidron. She's a filmmaker, and she's come up with this 5 rights framework, which is about rights for under 18s using the internet. Because one of the things that she says is, it's scary enough as adults when you think about all this stuff that I've just talked about. But if you think of that like children using this stuff, like think of the implications that has for them in terms of the food they might be encouraged to eat, the games they might be encouraged to play, all that sort of stuff. It's really quite unpleasant prospect. So you can look up, Bevan just did a TEDx talk. If you just Google Bevan-Kidron and TEDx, you'll find it, and she speaks very eloquently about the 5 rights framework. But it's really about things like being able to take down content that you've been put up, exploring the internet safely, and especially relevant to this one, she says, have safeguards on compulsive technologies such as gaming. So very relevant to the issue of data privacy. So I think in conclusion, we need to think about system design. So as Giles was saying before, it's not just about the UI, it's about thinking about the whole system that we're designing for. We need to engage with that and make sure that we're revealing the seams between systems and making users aware of what's really going on in the system rather than hiding it. And it's also about embracing interdisciplinary design. Lots of us, especially the old school people among us, there weren't courses in interaction design when we came through. We come from philosophy, English, psychology, all sorts of different backgrounds, and it's really important that we embrace that because we need to understand the social, technological, and political implications of what we're doing. Thank you very much. Actually, we had a final video because I wanted to end on a high note. We've got time. One of our design directors in Fjord, Stockholm, designed a system to help his son who's a type 1 diabetes patient, and it's a really nice example of how you can design with empathy and use data to have a positive change on people's lives.
My name is Jonas Höglund. I'm Service Design Director here at Fjord, Stockholm. In 2007, at the age of 5, my son Max was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Ever since, me and my wife had to have total control over Max to understand everything about Max's daily activities. Being a patient of type 1 diabetes means that you don't have insulin in your body anymore, but instead you have to submit it. But to know how much insulin to submit, you need to know all the variables around you. What he's doing, what he's eating, how he's sleeping, and so on. Diabetes is a global epidemic. Today, there is 387 million people diagnosed with diabetes. That number is expected to rise to 592 million people by the year 2030. That is more than 50% increase in less than 15 years. The yearly global cost related to diabetes is $612 billion. That means that in US, 1 out of every 9th dollar spent on healthcare is spent on diabetes. But it should not have to be like that. Today we're leaving all these digital footprints behind us. We're carrying around the phones with us, we have activity bands. All that data could be put to use to see patterns in the data. And we could do that on an individual level, but we could also do it on a community, on a group level. Fjord Fido will enable to predict from those patterns for the future.
The system will provide insulin intake recommendations based on different parameters. The most important thing is to create sort of a system that will digest all that data and provide the most relevant data for the users, for them to be able to make the right decision at the right time.
We started to find the right parameters or patterns that we want to use for the service.
Once you know what problem you're trying to solve, you have to understand the context that that problem exists in and ask all the contextual questions that you need to answer in order to get an understanding of the context.
For example, when Max is taking the bike to school, and this is something that we predict throughout recurring patterns, we will get a better and more accurate prediction of the need for insulin intake, which is the main purpose of Fido.
So for example, taking a breakfast scenario, the system could suggest that you would take less insulin than normal due to predicted activities, that you have a planned gym class that day, that you didn't sleep the way you usually sleep, or a prediction of you taking the bike to school.
It's going to have a huge impact on people's lives as a living service because it will adapt and change and not only improve one person's life with diabetes, but include improving the life of their families, their friends.
Why we started this project is this would have an enormous impact on Max's life. The promise actually to give Max his life back and give him the control. As a company, there is great business potential in bringing this to the market. And not just for diabetes, but as a living service platform for better self-treatment.